Okay, it's Friday night. Uh, Welcome back to the man cave. I've tried to improve the lighting in here a bit from last week, and I'm trying to get my laptop up and going here where I can follow the comment stream that comes along with this process. So give me just a moment here to get everything showing here. This hasn't actually come up. Here we go. It's come up. So I'll be able to bring that up and hopefully follow along with some of the comments. So welcome back to the Man Cave. It's Friday night here in Western North Carolina. We've had a really weird week with weather here, catching some of the remnants of Hurricane Sally that ripped up this way through the Gulf, hit down south. We got some of the leftovers of that yesterday, and it was kind of nasty around here. So I'm going to kick off Friday night with a beer, and I want to introduce you to a beer called Thousand Smiles Golden Ale. This is a product of Foothills Brewing Company over in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That's about an hour and 15 minutes east of me along Interstate 40. It's a really good brewery. They make some really amazing beers. The guy that runs that place, his name is Jamie Bartholomew. And Jamie, if I remember correctly, he apprenticed here in my hometown with two guys that run a brewery here called the Old Hickory Brewery. And he learned his craft from those guys and took it to Winston-Salem, built his own brew pub, restaurant. They've got great food, great beer. Their beer is really amazing. This Thousand Smiles Golden Ale is a perfect session beer, lawnmower beer. Call it whatever you want. It's one of these beers you can drink all day. It's 4.4% alcohol by volume, and it's got 16 IBUs, which means it's not bitter at all. It's a very mild beer, so I'm going to crack this one open, and this is the one I'm going to have for my Friday beer. And as you can see here, this has a really beautiful color. It's really clear, and it's a really lightweight beer. You can call it a some of the people in my circle like to call these yellow fizzy beers, and that's exactly what this one is. The problem is it's a real good one, so you can't talk bad about this one. It's something that everybody would like. It has a beautiful sweetness to it. It's a really, really nice beer. If you guys are having a beer along with me here, leave a comment. Tell me what kind of beer you're drinking. And that's going to wrap up the beer. So I'm just going to work on that as we go. I want to talk a little bit about some of the cooking I did this week. Didn't really do a whole lot, but we did some pizza. And I think last week I talked about some of these bagged pizza dough mixes that I got from Atlanta Grill Company. It's the Urban Slicer Pizza Works mixes, and I started out with the Neapolitan, but prior to that I made a short video on how to make a homemade pizza sauce. I think that's an important part of making pizzas, making your own sauce, especially if you're going to make a Neapolitan style pizza and cook it at extreme temperatures. And yes, Darren, I can see the comments coming live, and I can see who they're coming from because I've got my laptop going over here. So hopefully I'll be able to keep up with some of that. So making your own pizza sauce, if you're going to make Neapolitan pizzas and cook at 900 degrees or cook in those extreme temperature ranges, cooked sauces don't work as well. They get a little overdone. So you make a fresh pizza sauce. So I made a quick video on how to make a perfect fresh pizza sauce to make on Neapolitan pizzas. And at the end of that video, I discussed how to take that same pizza sauce and turn it into a traditional pizza sauce by cooking it and reducing it down and letting it thicken up some. So go check the Atlanta Grill Company page. I also shared that out to the Man Cave Meals page here. and it's on the Atlanta Grill Company YouTube channel also, that pizza sauce. It's real easy, and you can always feel free to modify those to make them your own, make them whatever you want them to be. So that was the first thing I did this week. The second thing I did was I did the Neapolitan style pizza video. I used the Urban Slicer Pizza Works Just Add Water mix to make some pizza dough. And then I got out the rock box and cooked. I cooked two. I only showed one of the two in the video because I thought it was just redundant to show the second one. But the rock box, we took it to I think we were just under 900 degrees in the ambient and the stone temp by the time I put that pizza on there. And in that video that I've also posted on Atlanta Grill Company's Facebook, YouTube, and I shared it here to Man Cave Meals also, I showed the entire cook. You could watch that pizza cook from the time I put it on till the time I took it off. And I think it took around 90 seconds. I didn't check it exactly. And then we had a look at it afterwards. I made a basic margarita style Neapolitan pizza with just, well, my version of it. I'm not going to call it authentic because I know you guys are going to hammer me for that. But I used my sauce, my homemade sauce. I like to put a little parm on mine, so I grated finally a little parm with a microplane grater on top of that red sauce, and then I put some sliced fresh mozz on it, and then we cooked it, and then I laid a few fresh bay leaves, or basil leaves. Don't put bay leaves on your pizza, by the way. A few fresh basil leaves right on top, and the residual heat from that pizza kind of cooks those basil leaves and softens them up and makes them just absolutely amazing. The pizza was delicious. I was skeptical about the ramifications of using a bagged pizza dough because those of you who follow me know I make my own dough. I make pizza dough from scratch because I think it's easy to do, but this was good. I was really impressed with the flavor and the texture of this dough. The bag instructions say you dump the dough, you dump the mix. I think my cat's coming to visit here in a minute, but you dump the dough, you add a cup of water, you blend it, or you put it in the mixer with the dough hook for 8 to 10 minutes and let it come together. And then you let it rise. And the package is a little bit vague about the rise. It says 2 to 4 hours. And I had watched the video on the Urban Slicer website where he did his Neapolitan, and he said his rose for 2 hours. So I said, okay, well, I should be able to get mine done in 2 hours, and that's about what it took. And it did well. I got a little better than double in 2 hours, and I was rising mine in a temperature that was about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a little warmer than average room temperature, but 2 hours to 2 hours 15 minutes, I think I was done. I tweaked the recipe a little bit. The bag, you use the entire contents of the bag with 1 cup of water, and it says that'll make 2 14-inch pizzas. And 14-inch pizzas are a little large for the rock box. I didn't want mine to be any larger than 12, so I got my calculator out and tweaked the numbers a little bit, and I came up with the correct amount of the mix and the water to get 2 12-inch pizzas. And I saved that last a little bit because I'm going to do something else with that at some point. But we let it rise, we shaped it, we topped it, we cooked it, and it was good. I was very impressed with the flavor. I had no complaints about it. It tasted just like any other I've done. The ingredients on the package don't indicate that there's really anything in that dough that's out of the ordinary. I don't know what kind of flour it's got in it, obviously, but it's good. And those things are $6.99 a piece, and typically you could get 2, or you could maybe get 3 12-inch pizzas out of that package if you're better at stretching the dough than I am. A good pizzaiolo can put a 200-gram dough ball into a 12-inch pizza without any trouble, and I'm not quite that good at it. And at the end of that video, I talked about that. I went in and said, that I'm I'm not an expert at that technique, but that pizza came out good. I'm happy with it. And this coming week, I'm going to do another one from that set. We're going to do the Detroit pizza, because Detroit pizza is one I do more frequently, and I really like that style. We're going to use that one. We're going to make a 10 by 14 Detroit pizza. We're going to cook it in the Alpha wood-fired oven as well, so that'll be fun. One of the questions that came up during the week when I was posting about pizza and talking about pizza, somebody asked me, what is your go-to pizza dough recipe? And until somebody actually asked me that, I don't have an answer. So I decided to make one. I do a lot of different things with dough, but when I got to thinking about it, can I have a go-to dough recipe that'll work for about anything? I got to thinking about that, and I think I can. So I wrote this down. I might come back, and I'll come back and put this in as a comment on this video after the fact if somebody wants to copy and paste it. But my go-to dough would be 500 grams of flour, 315 grams of water, which is roughly 62.5 to 63% hydration, 15 grams of olive oil, 12 grams of salt, and 6 grams of instant yeast if you're going to do a quick rise and not let it ferment overnight or anything like that. If you wanted to turn that into a 24-hour ferment and let it ferment in the refrigerator overnight, I would probably cut that yeast to 2 grams and do the exact same thing. That produces enough dough to make 3 12-inch pizzas, no problem. And with that being said, we've got some other information I put together that I'll share with you as well. How much dough do you need for certain size pizzas? I like to work with 12-inch pizzas. This is for a typical hand-tossed pizza that's not a thick crust and not a super thin crust, just a typical hand-tossed pizza. I like to have a 220-gram dough ball for one 12-inch pizza. And that being the case, you need a 340-gram dough ball for a 15-inch pizza or a 500-gram dough ball for an 18-inch pizza, which is pretty big. So the recipe that I mentioned here is going to make a dough ball that's 815, 830, 840, about 850 grams of dough, starting out with 500 grams of flour and 315 grams of water. You're going to end up with more dough than you need for a single pizza. So you can use those numbers to calculate, if you want to make one 12-inch pizza, you can do that. You can make that dough ball that's going to come out at 220 grams just by tweaking your numbers. So that's that. And like I said, I may make a different post about that on Man Cave Meals, because I think that's worth sharing, that recipe and those numbers, because those will give you a good starting point. But that'll make a general purpose pizza dough that you can cook about any way you want it. You could cook that Neapolitan style, or you could cook it in a 450 or 500 degree oven for a longer time, and that dough is going to hold up in any of those environments. It's going to do well. So that's what I did this week. This week was focused on pizza. And like I said, we're probably going to do a pizza again next week, so we'll see what happens there. So that's it for the pizza part of this. Now we go back to the beer part of it. But one other thing I want to talk about this week, we're going to add a gadget section to this. I thought about it today, and talking about some sort of gadget or toy here every week would be fun. And I want to show you the latest one that I have that's I'm really impressed with. And I actually wrote a review of this that's going to come up tomorrow on the Man Cave Meals Facebook page. This is a Vitamix scale. It's called the Perfect Blend scale. My wife and I finally caved in a couple weeks back, and we bought a Vitamix blender. I've not had one of those because I don't do a lot of blending. And my wife wanted to make something that really choked my Cuisinart blender down. And she said, we need a Vitamix. I said, okay, here we go. And one of my friends that's I think here with us tonight, Luca Verini down in the Atlanta area, told me, he says you need to go to a Costco Roadshow and pick one up. So I looked, and lo and behold, the Costco that's closest to me had a roadshow going on. So we went and bought a Vitamix, and while we were there, we saw this scale, and I didn't think twice about it. I've got a really nice kitchen scale that I like, but this kitchen scale has some bells and whistles. It connects to your phone or your tablet or whatever smart device you want to use via Bluetooth, and it does some really cool things. But before I talk about those things, I want to give you the reasons I like this scale before we talk about the smart features of it. I am going to get a second one of these that's going to live here in my man cave kitchen because I like this scale for a general purpose scale better than my OXO scale for several reasons. The first one is that this scale has a maximum capacity of 13 pounds, which is only a couple pounds more than my OXO. I think my OXO is a 10-pound scale. So that's not a huge difference, but it is a little better. This scale, though, has a resolution of 1/10 of a gram rather than a whole gram, and that's kind of interesting for me because when I'm doing breads and pizzas and I'm doing really long ferments, I like to do I'm sometimes measuring out amounts of yeast that are less than a gram. I've done doughs before that have as little as 1/4 of a gram of yeast in it, and I've been using one of these little scales like this to measure out those incredibly small amounts of yeast. Some people call these drug dealer scales, and that might be what they are, because I think I paid $11 for that on Amazon, but it works extremely well. But this guy can give me 1/10 of a gram measurement, and I've compared the two, and they're pretty close. So I can I can get 1/4 of a gram out of that pretty closely, because if I'm 2/10 to 3/10, we're still going to be good and not have to use a second scale. That's the second thing I love about this scale. The third thing I love about this scale is the LCD. It's got a backlit LCD. My OXO has a backlit LCD also, but I have to press the button to get the backlight to come on, and it stays on for a little while, then it goes off automatically. This scale, every time it detects that you've added something to the scale, if the backlight's not already on, it turns it back on. I love that. To me, that feature alone makes this scale way better than the one I've got. This scale at the Costco Roadshow was $79, and normally it's $99. And I also want to give some full disclosure here about this scale. The first one I got, the one I got at the Costco Roadshow, crapped out on me, and I had to take it back. And it lost its ability to connect with my smart device via Bluetooth. It could see it. My phone could see the scale. The scale thought it was connected, but they just would not talk to each other. So I talked with tech support at Vitamix, and they wouldn't swap it out for me. They said you just need to take it back to where you bought it. So took it back to Costco, and of course the road show's over by then, so I have to just get a refund on it. And I turned around and came home and just ordered another one from Amazon. So I ended up paying the $99 for it instead of the $79, but to me it's worth it. So those are the basic features of why I like that scale. Now the advanced features of this scale, I've been pretty impressed with so far also. Normally something like this wouldn't impress me, but this thing has an app. There's the app on your phone that's got recipes with it, and each of these recipes, what you do is you bring up the recipe and tell it to, you hit the blend button. And when you do, it tells you to set, like, for instance, we made, the first thing we did with this scale was some tomato soup. It says set your blender jar on the scale, and then it tells you, it detects that, then it tells you to add ingredient number 1, and it's figuring out how much you put in there by the weight. And when you get enough of it in there, it tells you to go on to the next ingredient, and then the next ingredient, and it's keeping up with how much is in there by weight. And when you're done, it tells you to blend it, to put it on the blender, and it tells you how to adjust the speed on the blender. And in this particular case, with the Vitamix blender, we made the tomato soup, and the blender actually cooks the soup. That thing runs so hard and so hot at its wide open speed. When you run it for 5 to 6 minutes, it actually had the soup up to serving temperature in the blender jar. There's no heating element there. It just gets hot like that. But it was amazing. That amazed me at how well that worked. And the app also allows you to scale the recipe. If you that particular recipe may be set up for 6 servings, it may be set up for something like 6 8-ounce servings. If you want to make 4 8-ounce servings, it'll allow you to change that, and it will automatically know. It'll change the ingredients amount that it's looking for while you're putting that stuff on the scale. You can change the number of servings, and you can change the serving size, or you can change both, and it automatically figures it, has you put the right amount in and do the blending. Last night, we made a corn chowder with this scale and with the Vitamix blender, and that was a hybrid process where most of the work was actually done on the stovetop. But what it had me do to start with is it had me set my saucepan on the scale rather than the blender jar, and it says put your potatoes in, and then put your vegetable stock in, and put some other things in. And once we had the right amounts of all that in, it said put it on the stove and simmer it for 15 to 20 minutes till those potatoes are soft. And then you come back, and then it says put the contents of that in your blender jar, set it on the scale, and then we're going to add some milk and some other ingredients. You know, actually we had corn. Obviously we had corn in there also, but it tells you to add the ingredients, and it's always keeping up with it. And then on that second batch of ingredients, it says put it on the blender. And we put it on the blender, and we only blended this time for 30 seconds. It's not going to actually cook for us on this one. And when it's done, it says return that back to the saucepan, put it on the stove, and simmer it until it's up to serving temperature, and you're good to go. And you had some parsley garnish and whatnot to go with it. And actually, you put in more whole kernel corn at that point also. It really made an awesomely good corn chowder. And it walks you through the process. And during that process of making that, the only kitchen utensils we got dirty was a ladle, a saucepan, and the blender jar. It's that. Well, I got a knife dirty because I had to peel a potato and dice the potato. But there was some onion. I diced the onion. So that's all we got dirty. We didn't have a bunch of multiple containers in there. And I'm really impressed with that. Like I said, it's a gadget for sure, but that thing's pretty cool. I'm pretty stoked with that, and I recommend it. I recommend trying it. Some of you may have it already. I know there's a lot of people out there that have the Vitamix blenders, and I'm a newbie to that. I never really needed one, but I never realized how powerful that blender is until I actually got my hands on one. That thing's scary at how fast it'll run. It makes a lot of noise. So that's the gadget for the week. So like I said, tomorrow on the Man Cave Meals page, late tomorrow afternoon, my written review of that will come up. So have a look at that. And that's the end of the gadget segment today. So got to keep working on that beer a little bit. So let's see what I'm missing here in the comments today. There's Luca. He's with us. And Al Carlton down in Adelaide, Australia. See, the Australians are just getting up. It's early in the morning down there, and all the Europeans have gone to bed. If we want to talk to the guys in Europe, I'm going to have to do this earlier in the day. And Lucas says he likes the New Belgium Southern Tea, Berliner Weiss. Uh, the black tea and lemon not doing much for me though. So Northern Ireland, we do have Owen Cushionan with us from Europe. He's staying up late tonight. Uh, Darren likes pizza and red wine. Darren's a snob like that. Darren probably sous vides his pizza. He does a Neapolitan sous vide, I bet. Lucas says, how long did I let that pizza dough rest to get the right elasticity? This is something weird that happened. I've never had this happen before. That dough, I divided it into two pieces right out of the mixer. I let them rise in two separate containers. One of them was perfectly soft and ready to go right at that point after it was fermented. I didn't have any trouble stretching it. It went right like I did. The second pizza was elastic for some reason or another, and I can't explain why that would be coming out of the same batch of dough. It didn't want to stretch out for me, so when that happens, you just have to step away from it for about 10 minutes, and usually in 10 minutes you can come back to it and it'll stretch, and that's what happened here. So yeah, I didn't have to wait any length of time. That dough was pretty soft. I didn't have any elasticity problems with it. The elasticity problems can come from using a mixer, unfortunately. That's one of the things that can create elasticity problems. Elasticity in pizza doughs when you pull it and it wants to snap back like a rubber band. When your gluten network is too strong, you run into that problem. That's why a lot of people want to hand knead their dough, which is fine. You can do whatever works for you. I've done it in the KitchenAid enough that I know about what that dough needs to look like and feel like to where it's going to be okay. And then I also know that, like I said, you can just let it rest for a few extra minutes after you've started stretching it. Come back to it, and it will stretch for you. Devin Thomas says, I don't have a KitchenAid type mixer. I've been buying dough balls from a local butcher, and they turn out amazing. Do the homemade pizza doughs make it tremendously better? I don't know. I've only had limited experience with pizza dough that I've bought pre-made. A long time ago, I made a video for Kamado Joe called Pizza 101, and I did some experimental pizzas there where I used some store-bought dough. And I think on that video, I bought one of the Publix pre-made doughs. That dough tasted fine, but that dough was the most elastic pre-made dough I've ever seen. I had to fight that one to stretch it. Later on, I found that Walmart sells a pre-made pizza dough in a bag that's $1, and that $1 bag of dough from Walmart was way better dough than what I bought at Publix. And I think the Publix dough was $3 and something for about the same amount. But tremendously better is subjective. That's something you just have to try. All I can say is if you haven't tried making your own dough from scratch, it's something you should do and figure that out on your own from your own experience. And let's see, Natalie Sweat. Do you use an induction burner? I would love to hear you talk about that sometime. I'm thinking about getting one. I would use it mostly outside next to my grill. I do have one that I have used out there. I've also got a small propane burner, and the stovetop in my wife's kitchen upstairs is an induction stovetop. I'm okay with those. In a perfect world, I'd always be cooking on a gas burner, but we don't have a gas stove here other than my small portable propane stove that I sometimes use out there. The induction burner I use when I need less vigorous flame. The little propane stove that I bought is a little bit too powerful even on its lowest settings to do some gentle simmering. So yeah, I use both, and you can find a lot of good ones. The induction burner I have came from Bed Bath & Beyond, and it's the Copper Chef brand. And I think it was about $100, and I think it came with some sort of really crappy pan that I never use. That's the only other problem you've got with induction. You've got to use a pan that's compatible. The induction burners have to have a ferrous core pan somewhere. You can use cast iron on it. You can use carbon steel. A lot of your triple ply pans are compatible. The pan will have an indicator on the bottom of it that looks like that little swirly Q logo if it's induction compatible. So you just got to you have to make sure you have a compatible pan for induction. I don't have any problem with induction. They work well. They do a pretty good job. So yeah, it's a good outside burner, and you got to run power to it. Dave Enriquez says, "Is that a lager?" It is not a lager. It is an ale. And yeah, it's a golden ale. The difference between a lager and an ale is how they're fermented. Other than that, you can't really tell a difference. Ales are fermented at a higher temperature with a top fermenting yeast, and lagers are fermented at cooler temperatures for longer periods of time with a bottom fermenting yeast. But this is an ale, and that's about where we are. I don't think we've got any more comments coming, so that's going to probably wrap us up tonight. I don't know if anybody else has got anything. If there's something you'd like to see done in this segment next week, let me know. Leave me a comment, and I'm going to try to have a different beer every week and talk a little bit about a beer. I love beer. So, and we'll talk about the cooks that I've done during the week and maybe some ideas for future cooks. And I'm going to try to have a gadget on tap every week. I'm not sure what that's going to be. Some of it may be new stuff. Some of it may be stuff I've got already, because I've got a lot of gadgets and I've got a lot of stuff I love using. So we'll go with that. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight. And until next time, this is John Setzler from the Man Cave.